Hi, this lecture is about law and how it relates to dentistry. So there's two types of law. There's a criminal law and then there's a civil law. A criminal law is a crime against society, and this can be a felony or a misdemeanor or even an infraction. That's like such as a traffic violation. So anything where the police have arrested you type of thing, you've done a crime. A civil law involves a crime against an individual. I'm going to sue you. You know, you cut your tree down in my property and it fell and broke this, and now I'm going to sue you. The cops aren't necessarily coming to arrest you, but this is a civil law against you. For under criminal law, a felony, that's the major crimes. A misdemeanor is a lesser offense. And an infraction is just something minor, such as the doctor didn't renew their license. In a civil law, you will have a contract law and a tort law. A tort law is a wrongful act that results in harming another person or persons, and a contract is an agreement between two or more parties that say you're going to do this normally for X amount of money. You'll always see contracts in the dental office about, you know, we're going to do some ortho, this is what we're going to do, this is how long it's going to take, this is how much it's going to cost. Sign the contract. Types of contract: there's implied contracts and there's express contracts. Express is anything that's written or oral. It's like spoken, but you've taken notes, such as a treatment plan or a financial agreement. And then contracts that are implied are contracts that are based on certain actions, even if a legal binding contract may or may not be involved, such as you came in with a toothache, you pointed to the tooth, you opened your mouth. That implied you wanted me to fix it, so therefore I did. So, the state regulations of dentistry. So every state, there's certain laws about dentistry, but then every state has their own. And they're very different. You would think that they'd be the same, but they're not. So state to state, you'll find different laws. So in Port and Chester, we have schools in Connecticut and Mass, and it's different from between Connecticut and Mass what a dental assistant can do. So the State Dental Practice Act is a state law which controls the practice of dentistry. It contains legal restrictions and controls, and it only applies to that specific state. So the purpose of it is to protect the public from being misled or mistreated, and everything's always defined and regulated down. So if you want to know what can a dental assistant do in the state of Connecticut, you'll go and look under the State Dental Practice Act, and it'll show you every step that you can and cannot do and what you need to be able to do that. So under that, there'll be levels of supervision. So direct supervision is when the dentist has delegated it and you're performing it, and now I'm going to check it before and after you actually do it. This is like for a dental assistant. So for example, I would like you to make a temporary crown for this patient. The dental assistant goes, they make the temporary crown, they put it in. The doctor's not going to release that patient till they come in, double check that crown. Okay, that's good. It's a go. General supervision is we're going to do sealants on this person. I'm going to supervise you until I know you can do it, but then I know that you can do sealants. You've been here for 5 years. You do sealants in all our children. I don't have to check every patient as it goes out. So that's general supervision. The doctor's there, he's on the premises, but he doesn't have to oversee everything. State Board of Dentistry is also known as the State Board of Dental Examiners. So it's responsible for administering and enforcing the Dental Practice Act, and it can suspend or revoke the dentist's license. Dental assistants don't, well, in the state of Mass they have license, but like a hygienist can have a license that can be taken away. So suspended is we're going to take it away for a certain amount of time and see if you really did that, and revoked is you no longer have that license. In the state of Massachusetts, they look at their level of supervision a little bit differently. They just classify it differently. So they have the direct. So that's still the same based on instructions given by the dentist who remains in the facility. And then immediate, the dentist remains and personally diagnoses the condition, authorizes the procedure, and evaluates the performance by the auxiliary afterwards. A little bit different. So legally, what's the relationship between the dentist and the patient? So there's a standard of care. So, and that all depends, and it's kind of a gray area here, because it really depends on what's customary for this area. If you This is normal practice for out here in, East Cupcake compared to over there where there's a lot of dentistry. So the standard of care may be different, but always you would being licensed would be standard of care, reasonably skilled, care and judgment, and the standard of drugs and materials. So those basics are always there. Illegal acts. Abandonment. You cannot discontinue treatment that has been started but not completed. So this is always tricky when it comes to ortho. You have a contract with a patient. Ortho takes 2 years. They come in and the doctor is legally responsible for putting that patient in the best care they have. So if they come in, they maybe even extracted teeth to start the ortho, and now we're moving teeth, and the patient doesn't come in, the patient doesn't pay their bill, the patient doesn't brush their teeth and everything else, and the doctor says, I can no longer treat you. I'm sorry, but you have to. You can't abandon them. Unless this is written out in agreement ahead of time and saying for these conditions, then I will refer you to somebody else, or I will stop treatment, and you have signed all this. But without warning, they can't just say. So say like you were doing everything, you came along, but you weren't up on your payments, they cannot discontinue you. That's against the law. A dentist cannot refuse a patient for any reason such as race, religion, or a specific illness such as HIV. So if you come in, I have HIV, oh, I'm not touching you. Well, of course you have to. And this all comes under the Americans with Disability Act of 1990. And so it becomes a federal law to protect people with physical or mental impairment, that they will get the same treatment no matter where they go. So risk management. What is risk management? So risk management is activities will help prevent or reduce any kind of legal actions against the patient, against the dentist. You don't want to have lawsuits. A lot of dentists have lawsuits, and sometimes they're minor, and sometimes it's a miscommunication, and a lot of times it's about a bill. And so any time that you can smooth something over, it's so much better. But you also want to prevent and reduce any risk of this. So what can you do? One of the main things you can do is take proper records. So things to include in the patient's clinical charts, medical and dental history, the exam finding, detailed records of treatment provided, their x-rays, letters from or about a patient regarding treatments, prescriptions, written consent forms or refuel of treatment, and any notation of broken appointments. Clinical record entries. Use the next. So most records today are done digitally, but if you're still doing paper records, this refers to that you're going to do it on the next line. And the reason for it is, even though you say, I like to leave a line in between, it makes it look neater and your eye can go there. Well, if anything came up legally, a lawyer could say, no, you wrote that in that line after the fact. That really didn't happen that day. And that's why you have to write in the very next day. And so all entries and information, of course, as soon as possible after the patient's visit, always date it, always sign it. And we will go over all this again when we're doing patient's records. But legally, you need to know that you have to record every last thing that you did, all your post-op instructions, if you left the patient in good care, everything. If it's not written down, it did not happen. And so again, if this is on paper, what happens if you make a mistake and you cannot use whiteout or anything else? You're just going to do a single line through the air, put your initials on it, and then move on. Who owns the patient records? The doctor owns the patient's records, period. Um, they're their records. They wrote them up. But what can the patient do? The patient paid for the treatment, the information about the patient has a right to inspect it and a right to have a copy of it. But the records do belong to the patient, to the doctor. So if you're moving away and I need to have my records transferred, they'll always do a copy of it. They'll never send the original. And they can never say, we're not sending your records because you didn't pay. They might try that, but that is against the law. Cleaning out old files. So if a patient has died or moved or transferred, how long do you have to keep these records? It really varies from state to state. So you never want to just discard without the doctor's permission. There's some states it's forever. You have to keep patients' records, and sometimes it's just 7 years. So state to state again differ. So being in the dental field, you now become reporters, mandated reporters, and this is in reference to abuse or neglect. So you see this typically in children, sometimes with spousal abuse. It's your responsibility to call the authorities. So, child abuse, the saddest of all sad. Although nobody wants to report it or get the parent in trouble, you must remember that it's about the child. So the acts of abuse are physical, emotional, neglect, sexual abuse. The warning signs, repeated injuries. So when you see somebody that might have injuries or bruises and they're at different stages of healing, the child didn't just fall down that one flight of stairs right now because everything would be the same. Unusual signs of accidental injury such as neck and cheeks, parent or guardian that are strict or overly critical, cigarette burns, dirty, unkept, poor oral hygiene, or bite marks. I've been in this field for a long, long time, and I have to say, I have seen it, and it's extremely sad. And we have reported incidents of it, and we did not report it, I have to say, in our office the first time, but then we would see this child. Luckily, we saw the child that they did come in, I suppose, but we would see it, and then finally we got to report this because it's not just one time, and here it is, and then sometimes you'll see neglect, and it's not deliberate on the parent's fault. It's just being uneducated on the parent's fault. So a child come in with rampant decay. Sometimes there's a language barrier, but you talk to them about sugar and they think it's just sugar like candy and they don't realize the sugar's in everything. And so the first thing you want to do is educate and then you got to call authorities. Domestic violence, there's battering, abuse within the household. And then there's dental neglect. This is rampant decay or chronic pain. One sad little child we saw, and it was just so sad. He would come in and he was in so much pain, but this child was so used, not luckily or sadly, he was in a home. He was already taken away from his parents, but he never whimpered, he never cried, and you just know that he was just so used to this pain. Elderly abuse. Unfortunately, elderly abuse is on the rise. There's physical, sexual, emotional neglect. They just rely on others, and it's typically not, I shouldn't say it's typically, it's also found in nursing homes, in these places where you think that they have hired people to care for the elderly. You would think that this is just somebody neglected in their home, but it's nursing homes. So you have to be aware of it, and a nursing home might have great people on a day shift and then come the night shift, and there's all sorts of things that's going on, and so it's just something that you have to be aware of, And if you see it, you have to report it. Thank you. Sadly, I hate to leave it on that end, but thank you.